The morning started with a knock that wasn't friendly. A group of men in dark uniforms stood outside a modest home, their chests puffed out like they owned the street. They weren't real officers, but they carried themselves as if they had full authority. The badges pinned to their shirts were fake, cheaply made copies meant to intimidate. "We're here on behalf of the HOA, one of them barked. "You've got violations stacking up. If you don't vacate immediately, we'll be forced to remove you." The black homeowner, a quiet man named Marcus, raised an eyebrow. He'd lived on that land long before the law even existed. Calmly, he asked to see their paperwork. What they produced was nothing more than a stack of generic forms, stamped with a seal that looked like it had been printed from the internet. "You boys made a mistake," Marcus said evenly. But inside, he knew something the impostors didn't. He wasn't just a homeowner. He was a decorated Navy veteran, and his circle of friends was even more dangerous to mess with. Minutes later, as the fake HOA cops tried to muscle their way onto his property, black SUVs rolled up the street. The sound of heavy boots hitting pavement followed. Out stepped 6 men, broad-shouldered, with the calm, lethal confidence of wolves entering a sheep pen. They weren't wearing uniforms, but their bearings said everything. These were Navy SEALs, Marcus's old team. The air shifted instantly. The impostors, smugness drained from their faces as one of the SEALs stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "You've got 10 seconds to get off this property before we stop being polite." The so-called cops froze, caught between bluffing their way through or running for their lives. Marcus crossed his arms, a faint smile touching his lips. The trap had sprung. The knock came early, sharp and insistent, echoing through the quiet morning air. Marcus was at his kitchen table, sipping coffee, when he heard it. He wasn't the type to rush. After years of military discipline, nothing startled him easily. He set the mug down, wiped his hands on a towel, and walked to the front door with steady steps. When he opened it, he found 4 men standing there in dark uniforms. Their shirts carried patches stitched with an emblem that looked official at a glance, but Marcus's trained eyes picked up the flaws instantly. The badges on their chests were cheap metal, shiny in the wrong way, and their belts carried handcuffs and flashlights but nothing of true authority. One of them, clearly the self-appointed leader, leaned forward with the kind of swagger meant to intimidate. "You Marcus," he demanded, squinting like he was trying to size him up. Marcus nodded. "That's right. What can I do for you gentlemen?" His voice was calm, polite even, but there was steel underneath it. "We're with HOA Enforcement," the man said, puffing out his chest. "You've racked up multiple violations. Your grass is over regulation height, your vehicle hasn't been approved for driveway parking, and your fence doesn't meet the uniform standards. We've been sent to evict you. You need to vacate the property immediately." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. He let the silence stretch until the man's smirk began to waver. Then, slowly, he said, "Evict me." "On what authority?" The man pulled a folded stack of papers from his pocket and waved them like they were a royal decree. Marcus took them, unfolded them, and read. They weren't legal documents at all. Just generic violation notices with the words, HOA Court, stamped in bold black letters across the top. He almost laughed. The stamp was uneven, the font generic, and the supposed signatures looked like they'd been scribbled by the same hand. "You boys made a mistake," Marcus said finally, handing the papers back. The man's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who wasn't flustered or afraid. "Listen," he said, stepping closer, "we don't have all day to argue. You're in violation. Either you pack up now or we remove you ourselves." Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying the man like a scientist observing a curious insect. "Remove me? From my own house? That'll be interesting to see." The man sneered. "Don't test us. We've done this before." But Marcus wasn't intimidated. He had seen men who actually carried authority, men who could end a fight before it started. These clowns in stitched patches and knockoff badges weren't those men. Still, Marcus knew better than to underestimate anyone. He decided to give them one chance to walk away before things escalated. "Why don't you call the sheriff?" Marcus suggested, folding his arms. "If you're so sure of your authority, have the county come down and back you up." The men exchanged quick, uneasy glances. None of them reached for a phone. That told Marcus everything he needed to know. Thought so, he said quietly. Then he added, you've got about 30 seconds to leave before this turns into something you don't want. The leader laughed harshly. What are you gonna do? Call your lawyer. Man, we're the law here. Law runs this neighborhood. Marcus's lips twitched into a faint smile. He hadn't planned for this situation exactly, but life had a way of putting the right pieces together. These imposters had no idea who they were dealing with. Because Marcus wasn't just a homeowner, he was a retired Navy SEAL with more than a few connections still active in the field. And it just so happened that he'd invited some of his old team members over for the weekend. Even as the fake cops began to push forward onto his lawn, Marcus heard the low rumble of engines coming up the street. He didn't turn his head, he didn't need to. He knew the sound. Black SUVs rolled slowly to a stop by the curb, and doors opened with crisp, practiced motions. 6 men stepped out, each of them broad-shouldered, steady, and radiating an aura of quiet confidence. They weren't in uniform, but everything about them, their posture, their eyes, the way they moved, spoke of years of training and discipline. The imposters froze mid-step. The swagger drained from their bodies as the 6 men advanced, boots heavy on the pavement. One of them, a tall figure with close-cropped hair and a scar along his jaw, stepped forward. His voice was low, firm, and commanding in a way that left no room for argument. You boys lost, he asked. The leader swallowed hard but tried to keep his bravado. This doesn't concern you. We're handling law business. The SEAL's eyes narrowed. No. What you're doing is impersonating officers and threatening a homeowner. That's a felony. Now here's what's gonna happen. You're going to turn around, get back in whatever clown car you drove here, and disappear. You've got 10 seconds. Silence fell. The imposters shifted on their feet, but no one moved forward. The leader's face had gone pale, sweat beading at his temple. He opened his mouth to argue, but one look at the 6 men standing like stone pillars behind Marcus shut him up quick. Marcus finally spoke, his voice quiet but cutting through the air like a blade. You tried to scare the wrong man. I don't rattle easy, and these men, he gestured toward the SEALs, they don't play games. Now, before this turns ugly, I suggest you do exactly what he said. The leader hesitated, glancing at his crew. But the SEALs, stares bore into him like spotlights, unblinking, unmoving. The weight of that silence pressed down until it was too much. He finally muttered, come on. Let's go. The 4 imposters shuffled back toward their vehicle, their false bravado shattered, their uniforms looking more ridiculous with every step. One of the SEALs chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. As the car pulled away, tires squealing, Marcus turned back to his friends. Appreciate the timing, boys, he said with a grin. The scarred SEAL clapped him on the shoulder. Timing's everything. Besides, you know we've always got your back. For the first time that morning, Marcus allowed himself to relax. He picked up his coffee mug from the porch railing, still warm, and took a slow sip. The imposters thought they could intimidate him with fake authority, but they'd learned a hard truth. Some men can't be pushed around, especially when they've got 6 Navy SEALs standing behind them. And deep down, Marcus knew this wasn't over. People like that didn't give up so easily. But if they came back, he'd be ready. This time they'd brought a warning. Next time, he'd make sure they faced consequences.